fair. Can you hear background noise from me? That's why I try to have my headphones on. Maybe some
Yeah,
birds
you have a lot
chirping.
more. Yeah, I can hear the birds chirping and everything, but that's fine.
All right, cool. Let's see here. I want to play a 30, so we're going to loop it. We're going to, what do I have to show it? No. All right. Oh, wait, no, I don't need to loop it. I want to do like a 30-second countdown. So when this airs, okay. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do
Okay.
like a 30-second countdown. So that way when this airs tomorrow, that'll show. And
Well, you mentioned somewhere, and I don't remember where, Teams email text
somewhere.
about maybe doing more than one episode today.
Oh,
So,
yes.
and
Both
then what are we trying to keep the episodes to so that you don't have to cut down so much?
somewhere between, I would say, around 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And it's okay if I
Okay.
cut it out because I can still use it. So I'm trying to what I'm doing is another thing that I'm doing when I'm editing is I'm just trying to organize the topics that we have going on. And then whatever doesn't air, like some parts I've taken out, will I'm sure we'll start to line up with other episodes that we're recording. So then I'll crop it all together.
But
Um,
how's I guess the video editing in this here StreamYard is pretty easy to get a hold of.
yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's not, admittedly, it's not what I want long term. I think it serves the purpose of just having, um, I mean, eventually, what I want to do is take the space that's around us and have advertisers there without it looking too busy or something. I don't know. I mean, I like the layout, but I think ultimately my goal is to download the raw data and then have an editor that can um, do something a little more engaging while we're talking. Maybe put
Yeah,
up.
well, we had a little more money, we would get a little studio room and have
Oh
mics,
yeah.
have
Well,
a
yeah,
production manager. So
yeah,
I'm certain at some point.
yeah.
So
That's down the line. No, that would be awesome because I would love to have, especially for the YouTube channel,
yeah.
um, some of the things like if there's a specific fact that we're referencing pop up in the background or something like that. I think that could be really cool.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and just to
yeah.
keep it like very interactive, I think that would be awesome. So I'm looking into that, but yeah, money. Um, but yeah, so we have this. So for tomorrow's topic, I have look at my events. All right, so tomorrow will be well, today. First, we can talk about collaborative competition and logistics, and then next week
Uh,
is July 3rd. The growing need for mentorship, the growing need mentorship for logistics professionals, and then we can talk about legends too.
okay, so that's okay. So I didn't have one for this week. We didn't pop one up on the screen here, or I'm not, or I didn't click on it or something because it's not my event thing. So,
Hold on, let's see. I should have you as a speaker.
maybe, but
Freaking flies, man. All right, I do have you as a speaker, but let's see. Because I did a bunch of them at the same time. It said that I did invite you, so I can't like send it again. But what I
okay.
can
So
do,
I didn't find it. So now what is called then?
it's okay. I'm gonna send you the link right now as the
Okay,
alternative.
in LinkedIn.
Yeah, that is kind of annoying that I can't resend it.
Yeah, so I must have missed that invite because I've got a July 1st, a July 10th, a July 3rd, all up here.
Yeah, it was a lot of activity. I could have gotten lost in. And that's another thing too. I was trying not to send too many invites and create too many because then it's just like boom, boom. But then again, not a bad thing. Let's see here. Have you spoken to Joey?
Yes, yesterday.
How'd that go?
Well, he's actually looking for a full-time salary position somewhere.
Oh, well.
So I didn't ask him about the reasons, he was leaving there or anything. I just, I wanted to make it clear that what I was looking for, So we spoke a couple of times. He wants to speak some more. He says that he would attend some of our things if he was invited. Or he would be happy to speak with us and join in with us in the conversation if he's invited to join.
I do invite him.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like to have an actual conversation on here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that'll be cool. Maybe I can get him in on the next episode. I have to figure out what to talk about. Interesting. So I'm almost going to bet that if he's looking for salaried positions, that he's probably not. You guys, so you didn't get into like maybe had he had any equity in the previous role?
Well, I did ask him that question, and he said there was once it was there, but by the time they were done, it had essentially been taken away.
That might have been Alba Wheels.
Yeah,
it sounded like that didn't go well.
Yeah, he was. We spoke quite a little bit, and then we actually spoke twice. We had to cut it short. I think last Friday. No, maybe before that, earlier last week. And then Friday we rescheduled to today. So, I don't know why he says Friday afternoon. And then every time we've done Friday afternoon, he's done the Russia Homa thing. So.
That's right. You did send me that message. I cracked up when I saw that. I was like, I can't unknow it.
So, well, let's, so we spoke yesterday and I don't know, for 15, 20 minutes. And that's when he wanted to, he wanted to know what the catch was. What is the thing that sets us apart from other freight brokers, from other entities? And that's where, I talked about being consultant thing, and that we're not just looking for freight brokers. We're starting there. But, I wanted to focus with an incubator type thing. We're putting together a training thing for corporate level freight brokers that have this idea that they'd rather go on their own and become entrepreneurs. And so that's where we want to have this training program to teach them how to do that so they can still essentially focus on their same situation. So that the catch really is about being an incubator for startups within trucking, or within freight anyways. So, and I don't know how much that impressed him. So, but we talked so he would like to continue to speak or talk with us. So he would like to talk to maybe both of us in a couple of weeks, see how things going. But, he needs to generate income. So he's got to look for a job.
Fair.
So he's not set in a way to be able to do this. And so right now, being with a bootstrap company that can't, it's of no benefit to him. He needs something more beneficial. So,
however, if he helped us get some funding.
Well, that's what I told him. Equity plus percentage. So
come on.
I said, well, during your hunt out there, keep speaking it up. You speak it up, and we can do something. We get some funding. You'll eat from that. So equity plus a percentage of whatever capital he raises. So, and he said he would do that. So.
Oh, okay. So it's on the table. I dig it.
Yeah.
All right. So what else did I want to ask you? I think that's it. Yeah, we can have him on. I would just have to figure out what we're going to talk about. And then LinkedIn blocked me from sending invites. So if I do it too much, it just completely takes away.
You mean like direct invites to your contacts?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. I guess it considers it spam. So I've been sending out like little bits at a time. So that way I don't get
I've
blocked.
been posting and reposting and particularly in some of the higher things like the groups and
Oh,
those
cool.
things that have a lot more people involved and posting them there is so yeah.
Awesome. We I lost my train of thought again. All right, maybe we could just get started. I'm gonna play our
Okay.
our little wind down, and I gotta remember to keep my head over here. This is rough. It feels weird. I don't know. Good day. Welcome to our 6th episode of Logistics Lens. I am joined once again by Bob Jarrett, CEO of Hatchway Trade Group. Don't forget to check out his QR code. How are you, Bob?
I'm good. So how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. This is like the highlight of my week now. I sit here and talk to you on camera.
Awesome. So today we are going to be
great.
Yeah, I love it. It's fun. And try to keep it different. Does take some some creation to kind of figure out how to set us apart, but all in all I really enjoy putting these together.
So today
we are going to be talking about collaborative competition in logistics. And I saw a post maybe a week ago by a connection that was shared into my feed about how collaboration in logistics is unspoken, but it happens. And I know that it happens because I've seen it happen in the way that you and I aim to collaborate. And I've seen it happen amongst partners that have known each other for quite some time. But for me, in my experience, collaboration is a tricky word. And so collaboration on the ocean side, not necessarily, you don't really want to be seen too much collaborating with your competitors because of the FMC and collusion and all that it could potentially mean to collaborate. So for me, when I was thinking about the definition of collaboration, it felt very limited early on in my career. But I'm learning that there's ways to collaborate that don't include inclusion or collusion. Excuse me. And so as we continue these weekly conversations, I thought that this would be a really great time to have that conversation. Because Hatchway, as a freight brokerage, you collaborate with various partners in the industry and in different ways. And the way that you position yourself can change depending on who you're looking to collaborate with. And for me personally, I like to think of the word as I like to use collaboration rather than partnership, because people hear partnership and they start thinking that it's so much more formal than it actually can be. And I think collaboration is probably just a friendlier word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Partnership implies, things that collaboration don't. Collaboration is about conversations and brainstorming, seeing where you might be able to, what did you say? Synergies, where
Synergy.
I hate some of those words like that we make up, but the synergies between people and how you might be able to partner in some things, and that's so collaboration to me is kind of before you ever get to that point to where you're doing some kind of partnership. So the brainstorming, how do we improve things within the industry? How do we, if I was working with other freight brokers or having conversations with them from other companies, we would be talking about the things that pull us down, that hold us back.
Yep.
How do we get around those? Working about experiences within the industry and how we each have made our way, and the perspective that we each have and how it differs, and so that we come at things from different angles. And so when we talk about those things in a collaboration, it allows us to come back and be better for ourselves, because now we have different points of view, different perspective that we can then, maybe use in trying to win a new client.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a really good point. The collaboration is the brainstorming part of it that happens, prior to any sort of partnership. One of the ways that I started to see collaboration in a new light, was when we started working together, and at the past carrier. And so understanding how those services could be marketed in a highly competitive market, and figuring out different ways to position the brand in front of these prospective partners or collaborators was kind of a whole new world for me, to be honest. And it was really cool because, like I said, I had always thought of, I guess, the fear of being caught colluding always made collaborating feel illegal, is the best way that I could describe it, to be honest with you. And so I never ever wanted to fall into, I wanted to keep myself safe. So in order to do that, I just stayed in my lane. And I think in doing so, sort of did myself a disservice. And so when I was learning all the different ways that we could collaborate with other companies in the industry, like I said, it just opened up a whole new world of logistics. And I think so often we learned in the last maybe 2 episodes ago that most businesses in logistics are small business, and like 99% of trucking companies are, what was it, like 6 trucks or less, I think it was, or 10 or less trucks.
Yeah, some of those numbers like that. Yeah.
So there's a lot of small business in our field, and it's easy to get caught in, as you like to refer to it, as a silo in your business. You get caught up in the operation of the business. You get caught up in, growing the business, keeping the business alive, and everything that goes into running a business. But when you're in that sort of autopilot mode, I think, or tunnel vision is on, completely overlooking the opportunities that exist around us to collaborate with other businesses. And one thing I found so fascinating was when I realized that a lot of these trucking companies, essentially, they start out by building a route. That didn't come. I had to realize that, essentially, because when I'm working for the ocean carrier, their routes have been long established, right? And so the customers are following because the routes are there.
I think that, terminology here for people who are listening, when you're saying route, like in a ship line, that's one thing, but in a route in trucking is a little bit different. So we'll call it a lane in trucking.
Yes,
they're going to understand better.
Yes, you're right. And so this is where we start to have to differentiate. But no, exactly that. And so so a route in international shipping, it would equate to a lane in trucking.
Yes.
And so having an ocean carrier background and knowing that majority of the ocean carriers that I work with have been in business for so long, they have these well-established routes that shippers go to them for. They depend on them for a certain level of reliability. And so understanding how much small business exists on the trucking side and seeing how you can build a business around a lane or various lanes, and how the business model could potentially be limited by pretty much inability, like it doesn't make sense to it could end up not making sense to service a request that comes in based off of the route or lanes or lane that has been established. And that came up a couple times in our pricing, in some of the requests that we had. And once I understood that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But it started, like I said, it started to open up my idea of what our relationships in the market could be, right? It started to make me think, well, all right, it doesn't make sense for us to service this lane, but maybe we can find someone else to do it.
Right.
And maybe we could potentially grow our footprint within a customer on the Oceanside market share within that customer to, pretty much so both parties can take advantage, or multiple parties can take advantage of growing with that customer in their market, no matter where it may be.
Particularly with the larger customers and the larger shippers,
Exactly.
because they're going to have multiple lanes, and then different carriers are going to be better at servicing the different lanes depending on where they're coming from and the destination. So, and how that carrier has worked that lane, whether they have backhauls, so that they have a regular dedicated lane where there's freight going both ways, that allows them to keep their costs down, which allows them to keep their pricing down and be more competitive. But they may do that in a lane like from Columbus, Ohio to Indianapolis, Indiana, but then they can't do it from, Columbus to Cleveland, because that's not their lane. So their pricing would be different, may not be as competitive. So, and just in that one little shift of direction. So where ship lines are different. I mean, you're going to ports of call and the lanes or the routes that they're taking are all set. And so when they bounce from port to port, so all their costs are calculated. So on a regular basis, according to manpower. So, but it also takes longer, so it doesn't fluctuate as much as the price of a lane or an area on the ground. So, because, carriers also come and go. So what was now strong for one carrier, they did something wrong. Suddenly that lane's no longer strong for them anymore, and other carriers have to fill the void.
Absolutely. And I think another point that you mentioned too, in regards to, I lost it, Bob.
That happens.
I'm having such a day today. I don't even know why. You brought something up with, okay. So another thing that I learned getting into the truck side was the limitations that exist for, let's say, like a drayage carrier and the whole 150 air miles of servicing. And so depending on, I guess, and you're the compliance side, so you would, can
It
you
depends on what they are.
Yes. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the differences, or just more on that 150 mile service area radius?
Okay. So there's through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the Office of the DOT, on the federal level, there's hours of service that a truck or a driver can perform each week or each day, and it works in. So there's different rules, like how many hours they can work. So there's different schedules. A 60 hours, 70 days or 7-day schedule. So 60 hours in 7 days would be a local driver that maybe only operates within 150 miles, air miles of their home base. So every day they start at the same location and they finish at the same location. So they're different requirements than somebody who's running more of a national or overnight routes, and every day they have to find a place to park their truck, depending on what they're doing. That's a 70-hour, 8-day schedule. So they can work 70 hours in 8 days. So now there's other limitations, like on that local guy who starts and stops at the same location every day. They get a 12-hour or a 14-hour window in which to operate. So that 14-hour window, there can still only be 11 hours of driving and 3 hours of other things. So it's, but there's still, every time they take 36 hours off, it resets their hours. So if they worked, 2 days back to back and then took, say Wednesday off into Thursday and didn't work again until Friday or Saturday, their hours would restart. So, every time it's 34-hour restart. 32, 36, 34. It's been a long time since I've actually was working outside the 150 air mile radius. So then, and they have different requirements then. So there's an e-log or electronic logbook that if you're outside of the 100 air mile radius, it's required by law. That keeps track of how much driving time, how much downtime, how much loading time. There's 4 categories that they do, and then they get the roadside inspections will take a look at that. So it gets very convoluted. Depending on, not all truckers are going to operate, so they could be neighbors down the street from each other, like where and they could be a flatbed carrier and a drayage carrier and a tanker carrier all on the same street, and then they don't work with each other at all in some cases. Or if that dry van carrier or the drayage carrier needs to have a flatbed, he may call them up and they partner in that way, and they give work to each other, and they feed off each other. That's about the limit of collaboration from companies within the trucking segment. So then what I think from a broker standpoint, so being a third party, for that small carrier, and as you said, a very high percentage of the carriers in the United States are small carriers, no matter what niche they fill. Those carriers it's very hard for the small carrier to have a dedicated sales force. So
Yes.
brokers, a long time ago, they used to do trip leasing, and owner operators could bounce from carrier to carrier. From one load is for one carrier, and another load is for another carrier, and the carrier is essentially a broker sitting in a hotel room near a truck stop. This was a long time ago, before deregulation, and so they would have a different DOT depending on it. They use signs that they could change out on the side of their truck. So depending on where they were, they could go to find all these. Of course, everything was done by phone. They didn't have computers. So, they had to go to this office and that office to find out where the loads were. At the truck stop, there would be literally a load board was not electronic. It was sometimes paper, and you go into the truck stop and they pin them up on the loads would be pinned up.
It was an actual board.
Actual load board. Yeah. So that's where that comes from when you see truck stop or DAT and those load boards that everybody puts out there. So there's so when we get into that and we bring it forward and we jump forward, now everything's on the computers and we're sharing information back and forth.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that those small carriers can still now afford salespeople. Or, because they're out there driving, they may be doing the operations. So then the brokers, as they kept forward and they changed the laws and quit allowing the trucks to switch DOT authority from day to day, right,
Mm-hmm.
to increase safety and compliance. We come forward where now brokers, some carriers don't have any kind of sales force at all. They rely on brokers to be those sales force. So when we're as a third party broker, we can decide we want to collaborate with our carriers, because we're going to have carriers from every aspect, depending on what it is from that we want to be involved in, from flatbed, low boy, drop deck, on that kind of stuff, where they're moving heavy equipment, heavy hauling, to dry van, to refrigerated, whether it's produce or whatever it happens to be, and even tankers, bulk tankers, liquid tankers. So I want to, as a broker, to have contacts all over the country in all of those different areas if I'm moving loads, and that's the way my shipper base is. So when I'm out selling, when I'm out working and looking for the shipper, whatever their commodity that they need to move, I need to be able to have a carrier that has that, have a relationship there so that we can get that covered. And then still make certain that all the compliance is taken care of, that the carriers we're using are within compliance, so that the shipper knows that we're that way. So it becomes this huge convoluted process that we all find our little niche to fill. So
Absolutely. And you bring up a point where, and I think working in my specific niche in ocean or international, and there would be times over the course of the last 9 years, as we'll call it, building my book of business, my territory, which even though I'm not with the carrier right now, I still have and keep like mental, like I have my territory. It's part of my process. And so you get these questions over time, like, hey, do you know somebody that could help with this? Or do you happen to know somebody who can service this? And I think every time we hear those types of questions, for me, what I've trained myself to do is think of that as an opportunity, because whoever's asking me that question is asking me that because they need servicing in that area, but B, they're looking for a referral. And the referral that they're looking for is hopefully someone that I've worked with, that I trust enough to pass on to them for their needs. And
Mhm.
so when I started to think about those questions that way, instead of a yes or a no answer, and honestly, a lot of the times it was no. And as I replay these moments back, I'm like, oh my God,
You left
how
so
was it?
many opportunities on the table.
So many opportunities on the table. And it's crazy because now that we were talking about so for instance, let's say just a regular dry van trucking company is servicing a shipper for years upon years, and that is common, I think, in with small trucking companies. They tend to service the same shippers for a long time, and
Mhm.
it's a beautiful thing. And it could be even more beautiful. It could be gorgeous if this trucking company could have contacts that could help to fill the need of their shipper over the long term. Let's say their shipper, it's no longer dry cargo. Now they're shipping refrigerated cargo, but the small carrier doesn't have the resources, i.e., money, knowledge, whatever it be, um, to get a refrigerated truck, or the genset that would make
Right.
the truck refrigerated. Um, but they can still refer that business out. And in a lot of ways, and it's actually talking this out with you is kind of like restructured the way that I think about it. It's almost like the trucker themselves, the small owner operator carrier, becomes sort of a broker too, or they can, where they have their book of partners, or collaborators as we'll call them, and so that way when they get requests, they always have somewhere to send it to, and can ensure that their shipper is essentially fully covered no matter what their own limitations are.
Mhm.
um, and so, I mean, obviously, I don't even know if that's allowed. Can a trucker be a broker?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yes. A trucker can be a broker. A lot of times they'll do it into, um, depending on who's advising them to do what, as far as insurance and legally. A lot of times there'll be separate companies operating under a brand, and that's when the brand comes about.
Okay.
So somebody like JB Hunt or Schneider, those big guys out there that we all know, particularly public traded ones where we own stock in them and whatnot. They have multiple companies, but they have a parent company, and then they have like child companies underneath that do different segments. So
Okay.
they each have their own brokerage, freight brokerage. They have their intermodal operations, their dry bulk, and they get into everything in order to, and they buy up some of the smaller carriers along the way, and we all see these things happen. And then there are these huge conglomerates that they lumber along. They're not flexible a lot of times, so they keep with the bigger, larger shippers a lot. And some of the smaller distributors is where the smaller carriers are able to focus. And but then when you get away from the corporate world, the big guys, whether they're the big multinational shippers or the big suppliers, the big truckers, the big brokers, all those, when you bring it down into the where we call the real world, where most of us operate, most of us with entrepreneurial spirits, the small businesses which really make up everything. We work more in a collaborative effort. So they're all looking to squeeze pennies out of whatever they're, and out of every dime that they do, or just a little portion of a penny in those large areas. And the rest of
Mm-hmm.
us are trying to, as we said, when you're a small carrier, when you run 5 or 6 trucks, if you're only running 5 or 6 trucks, you either, and one of those drivers can't go to work, then and you're in a dedicated environment where that truck has to work every day, you either have to find another driver, have somebody on standby, or you've got to be willing to get in the truck yourself and go do that. So it becomes,
and
this
hopefully you're not
process
in
where,
another truck.
hopefully you're not in another truck.
Yeah,
But so comes this process where we have to build everything, this great foundation, in order to be. You have to trust people. You have, when you hire somebody, when you hire the driver, you have the trust that they're doing the right thing at all times. So we do all these background checks and everything in order to go there, because, when you come up with partners and drivers and things, they can make or break a small company.
absolutely.
And so that's where, it's difficult to have any kind of margins when you're running those trucks in order to be competitive with the other trucks, to be out there with a sales team. So that's where today's environment is so collaborative and so relationship based, that I don't believe in the long term companies like, well, we see what happened to Convoy. We'll take them for instance. They had these techie guys came in and built this fantastic software, but then they had no human factor in there. So when it came time for them, now suddenly our margins are pennies, not like what they were during the pandemic when they rose to power, and our margins are down to pennies. They had no way to operate with those pennies, because they had built so much debt that they couldn't continue to function properly, because now we're suddenly having to operate at a break even or loss sometimes. So we have to decide what are our loss leaders, because in order to keep the thing that is profitable going, right? So but also just keep the cash flowing, so you can continue to go out there. So it becomes this whole process. And if we get into it too fast and we don't understand our own niche, if we, in our niche, whatever we do, it will evolve over a 30-year career, from, whether we're in private fleet when we start out, dedicated routes, LTL, and that evolves into some truckload, and it evolves into a little bit depending on what the customer wants or the client wants and what they're paying for it. And over the years, we can end up where we have experience in every different aspect.
Like you. You have so much experience. It's like well-rounded. But also you bring up a really good point too. So usually when we think of resources, we think of time, non-refundable, can't get that back.
Right.
We think of capital, any money that we have that's coming in and out of the business. But now I would like to redefine resources to include collaboration or our collaborators. And I challenge our industry to do the same, because the limitations, as I think any small business can understand, they exist. You will come upon a request at some point that you cannot service. Does that mean that you tell your customer no, or does that mean that you have the network pre-existing to make sure that your customer is covered? And when you do that, you open up the doors to more servicing. And so when we're looking at identifying the structure, right? Because and as I mentioned before too, I think for me, working in international made it very difficult for me to identify, I guess, the whole structure immediately, because I was learning most of the time as I was getting up on my feet and trying to understand this beast that is supply chain. And so helping small businesses, carriers, to understand that through collaboration, which is a resource that could help their business grow tremendously, they are able to branch out and service the industry in different ways. And so I think it's really important to kind of point out that structure that exists, even though they're a small carrier. That is how, and we've talked about this over the last year too, how small companies can still operate their niche, can still service their customers exactly the way that they want to, but through the collaboration of other companies, can compete against some of these larger companies that ultimately could potentially put a small business out of business because the margins are so low.
Yes,
That
yes,
felt
it's
like
so thin.
that felt like a run-on thought.
Well,
But
no,
I
no, but it was right there, and it brings us back to what we're talking about. Collaborative competition in logistics, and even though we're competing with each other, we do have to rely on each other.
Yep.
So whether we're the shipper, whether we're the receiver, consignee, the carrier, the broker, whoever's in between, we have to build these relationships, and these relationships need to be built on trust.
Yep.
That old fashioned handshake.
Hmm.
And so no matter how much we put money and throw money at something, no matter how much we throw technology at something, no matter all these other things, it comes down to the relationship, the collaboration, the human factor that brings it all together and allows us to operate. So
Yep.
when we try to take those things away, we lose our balance.
Yep.
And and it goes into all these other little things we're talking about. So we could continue to sit and talk about how all of these different little areas of operating a company and all the different little things we need to do mean something. But when every time it's going to come back to the relationship, the collaboration you have, and how you work that. So,
Yep.
and every time it should come back there. And if it doesn't, then then we probably got a robot to do it anyways, and then it didn't need a human in the first place.
Oh no. Oh no. No, for sure. And that is for certain. I think another area that I wanted to pick your brain on is the idea of the broker um, position, I guess, in the industry. And so, having worked in international, I have worked with lots of brokers over the years. I've had my least favorite, and for reasons I will leave unnamed. Um, but the consensus is and can be that working with a broker or a lot of carriers, some of the ones that might be considered mid-sized, they don't like working with brokers. And I understand that because I've come across brokers that I don't like working with either. But I realized over the years that brokers are just people, right? And there are all sorts of people that exist in the world, and some are trustworthy, some some can tell the truth, some are reliable, and then you have people that are the complete opposite. And so when you look at the brokers that you partner with and that, I guess, certain level of distrust that exists in the market, I wanted to ask you, what does it feel? I guess, what did you know was important when you were switching over from the asset based side to being a broker? What did you know needed to be a part of your business to make sure that you didn't become essentially one of those brokers that, the industry doesn't
Okay.
enjoy?
And well, yeah, one of those brokers.
Yeah.
I the first 20 years of my career, brokers were put way down on one of those very low pedestals with politicians and attorneys. Back in the day when before ambulance chasers became the largest law firms in the countries, when they were considered ambulance chasers, brokers, politicians, carpetbaggers, liars, cheats, and thieves. That's where they were. And, and in my mind, and so I didn't use them for a long time. And I didn't see, 30 years ago, we had salespeople working wherever we were at, and that they worked for that company. And then, so much offshoring happened. The markets started getting smaller or changing in the way things were happening. So 20 years ago, brokers were really coming onto the scene, and we see, and more than just freight now. So when we talk about brokers, and understand freight brokers being here in the United States and international freight forwarders are very similar but different licensing, but they do essentially the same thing. And what happened is that over the last 20 years, particularly the last 10 years, the industry has become so dependent on freight brokers, particularly the small carriers, and then driving that money out of here was the thing. So a freight broker is a middleman, an intermediary, right? That if the shipper and the carrier were just direct, whatever percentage that broker was taking out of the middle, didn't matter. So when there were a lot of carriers still going direct to shippers and brokers were trying to find their way in between, they were trying to price things in such a way that they were taking money out of the truckers' pockets in order to put in theirs and then lowballing the shipper price. And then, and that's where they got that liars, cheats, and thieves come from. So like if a delivery required a lift gate, they would tell it wasn't required to the carrier, but charge the customer for it and then keep the money because the carrier would somehow get it done and not charge them for the lift gate service, those kind of things. So we had to go through after deregulation, when pricing was already pre-negotiated by government contract and all kinds of things. When deregulation happened, we had to go through this process, this learning process, and how the industry was going to fan out. And so essentially nowadays, all the profit's been taken out of running 1 or 2 or 3 trucks, except for the driver wage and maybe a little bit more. And the broker is taking that piece in the middle, but then they become the sales force for multiple carriers out there. So the thing to me is that if I'm selling a service and that service is trucking, no matter what niche in trucking it happens to be, I got to have the carriers I can trust and rely on. And they need to know that they can trust that I'm being honest and forthright with them. So the collaboration is extremely important. So and that I'm not necessarily just looking to go for the bottom dollar carrier and just get the job done without paying attention to anything, that I want good work, good repeat business, and I want to build that. So in order to do that, I have to build a strong relationship with the carrier at the same time as I'm building a strong relationship. I have to add that value in between to make it worth their while. Everybody's to make it win, 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 so to speak. So
that's a really good point.
Okay.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to tell you it was a good point. Before you and I ever met, I knew that I wanted to understand how my knowledge related to the overall supply chain. And so I started to join various groups on, various social media, and I started to branch out my network to include owner operators, dispatchers, and so it went from local to all over the country and even into some other countries, which was pretty cool. But so much of what I saw was just an overall unhappiness from the truckers in terms of what they're bringing home, because remember, a lot of these companies are operating at small capacities, right? They're either a single truck, and as you mentioned, it's just the driver wages at that point that they're keeping. And depending on the lane that they're servicing, they could be far away from home for a long time. I mean, there's so many things that play into it, but I guess one of the things that I always found to be, what's the word that I'm looking for? The integrity that I always found in what you were trying to build was knowing immediately that you already knew who you didn't trust and why, because of the experiences that you had over the course of a 30-year career in logistics. And you knew that if you were going to go into the broker space, that you wanted to make a difference in that perception. You wanted to make sure that your carriers are going to be paid well, because you understand that when they're not, what that means for them. How much harder they have to work, that they might actually go out of business because they can't sustain it, or they'll end up just taking work with a very, very large firm just to get the work, but essentially even smaller margins than what they were probably doing on their own, which is something else.
Sometimes it's pennies.
Yes.
And
it's
a lot
ridiculous.
of times it's pennies, So, the large carrier
the large corporate carrier nowadays, they can operate on those pennies because, when you have 10,000 trucks plus on the road, like some of those guys, pennies add up
Absolutely.
to a lot. But when you only have 1, 2, or 3 trucks, pennies don't add up to the same amount.
Absolutely
So,
not.
but you still have to, for that guy, that person or girl, whoever it is that wants to have the autonomy to make their own decision to decide on what loads they take, and they're going after that the insurance that it takes and the compliance in order to maintain a DOT. There's so many things involved in being able to do that, and just getting to that first truck on the road is tens of thousands of dollars in getting it operating before you ever even turn a dime of revenue. So you have to have the experience somewhere. You have to have the understanding, just some sort of knowledge on how you're going to do it. So you can't really do it without a plan. And then even best laid plans, we all know how those go. So it can be.
Don't we?
So understanding and that's just from the industry, from the trucker perspective, down to one truck, and we take a look about that and how difficult it is to be there at that perspective. And you take a look at in a brokerage, I can see that somebody who decides that they want to work in logistics, but they want to be in a different place than maybe somebody, whoever they were looking up to, they wanted to be a little bit different. So they go to college and they get their degree in logistics or their MBA or whatnot, or they're working on their MBA but have a degree in transportation, and they go into some place, into a brokerage house, and they start making the phone calls and basically they learn operations. They learn that, okay, so this customer is going to have a load. I'm going to find a carrier to cover it, and I'm going to learn this operation. And they don't learn all the things in behind because the corporation isn't going to teach them that.
Ding, ding.
So now then, over the last couple of years, a lot of these corporate freight brokers or corporate agents, whatever you want to call them, that sat there and done that, have been being wiped out. They're being let go because everything downsized over the last couple of years. Now, where do they go? If all the companies are laying off all these people, where do they go? And the only thing they knew how to do was to do that go-between. So, and that's part of what I decided HTG would be to help these displaced freight agents that are working from the corporate world. Because I have me, I'm not fond of the large corporate world. I'm not fond of the politics. I'm not fond of the way that works at all. I think it should be a more collaborative effort. It should be more open and understanding and better training and bringing people forward. Because that's how you get things to operate on autopilot, by having your checklist, and you come in every day and you make certain that things are working the way they're supposed to be. As a leader, that's and then if something needs a little tweak, you tweak it. And then you tweak it, because everything takes time. The best things take time to build. So then, so now if you're being a carrier, you should be doing the same thing. You got that guy who wants to be that owner operator. I've helped plenty of people, plenty of men and even a few women become owner operators throughout my history, where we talked about how much it was going to be to no longer be a company driver, and to buy your first truck, how much money they were going to need for the equipment, how much reserve they were going to need in order to pay the bills while they're trying to make money, what the timeline would be before they got into the black. So you 30 years of doing this and looking at this, and now stepping into another side, I see that essentially a freight agent is essentially a dispatcher, that doesn't have the understanding of doing anything much more than dispatching. So he could be working in a trucking company as a dispatcher. He could be working in a brokerage as a dispatcher. You got operations managers at different levels. And so all I'm seeing is that there's these ways that we map all this ideas, everything, and then we figure out what can be done with computers, what parts finance, what parts HR, and so that's what HTG is about. And then I want to help bring people in. I want to help truckers become better truckers. I want to be able to help freight agents become better brokers, better agents, in order to grow their book of business. Everybody has a book of business, whether they're the trucker, whether they're the distributor, the importer. I can help them and how to bring it in better from the international side, wherever their products coming from, South America, Europe, Asia, wherever it's coming from, and help them understand, when you take care of, we haven't even touched on the logistics of a warehouse at all. We haven't even talked about that, and the third party logistics and warehousing and how that works, but it's similar. It's all about getting a package from point A to point B, no matter what that package is.
Absolutely.
And we all have the same things going on. It's just that, we all tend to have a focus in our own area, whatever's inside that package or whatever's inside that truck, or whether it's bulk, whether it's liquid, whatever. We all have little things we got to learn, but it's still just about getting something from point A to point B. So we got to keep it simple. That whole KISS acronym, keep it simple, stupid, right? And so long as we do that and we make certain that we're maintaining our human factor, we can take our software, we can take our robots or whatever hardware, the truck and all those kind of things, depending on where they're at. And then as humans, we can work that together, and we can all work relationships and make it better for all of us. And I think that finding that balance is the most important thing we can do. But we can never take the human factor away. So the relationship, the collaboration has to be there. That's how we get better.
Absolutely.
So, wow, I went off on a rant again.
No, it's okay. No,
that's what it feels like. A big old rant. So that's what, so when I take all those philosophies, and that's that I've had, where I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, I've failed several times, throughout, and I pick right back up and get right back on my feet. I felt like last fall that I was failing. I felt at the beginning of the year that this year, even though I started up HTG and I felt like I failed. I felt like I failed you at one point. And yet we're standing back up. We're getting back up. We're dusting ourselves off right now, and we're getting ready to start crawling along and hopefully walking soon, and how things work. And we're doing that through collaboration. You, me, we talk about Adam, we talk about Deidre, we talk about Joey, who we were talking about earlier before the recording started. All these things, and we're collaborating, and we're going to continue to add more names, and Phil and Steve and Becky and Brittany.
Absolutely.
They're and that's what we want, is to be able to bring all this together, and we collaborate how we can help each other. And whether no matter what niche we are, we can find a way to help each other out through our networks, through introductions, through collaboration.
Absolutely. And I will say that if I had to give advice to someone who has never collaborated or has been so stuck in their niche, actually it's twofold, right? So when I started my career at Enterprise Car Rental in 2013, when I got promoted to assistant manager, we took on these roles called the BCAM, the business corporate account manager, or branch corporate account manager. I don't remember what the B stands for. I'm going to say branch, because that's what we were responsible for, the branch. But we had to, as part of our goals every week, was we had to take time to go see our corporate accounts. And at that point, it was car dealerships, anyone that needed to offer like a service rental or something like that, any business that was in our local community that offered rentals or anything like that. So whoever those accounts were that were sending us referrals on a regular basis, we needed to get in front of them, and we needed to make time to do that. And one of the most common challenges that I had, and I know that I wasn't the only one, but I can't speak for everyone, is that when I was running that business, it was so hard to step away.
Always.
Sure. And that is like what I want to point out, is that it's always going to feel hard to step away. It's always going to feel like harder than it actually is to step away. And it's probably always going to be at the front of your mind as well, where it's like, you need to do it. You never know how one conversation could change the landscape of your business. And one thing I've always, and even at one point, when I was actually talking to Rob from Carrier Source, we both agreed, you never know, that one conversation you have, especially with a small trucking company, it could change their entire life just to have one dedicated lane. Like, they don't need a lot to make a huge impact when you're working with small businesses. And so I think of that part of my career often, because I don't think the pressure ever just all of a sudden, it's not like the ninja foodie, it's after the 20 minutes, your rice, you just let out the pressure and everything goes away. No, we're always going to have that pressure. It's always going to be on. We're always going to have other things to do. But thinking about networking in terms of collaboration, in my idea, is like the gift that keeps on giving, because you make time for it. You nurture these relationships that you find. You have to be vulnerable with these people, right? Like, you can't ask for help and then keep your entire problem to yourself. It doesn't work that way. Not if you're going to truly achieve.
And you know what? It takes it. So it's always my worst subject, reaching out to people.
Oh yeah.
And whether it's that idea of being vulnerable, or it's just coming from the fact that, I've been a leader for so long, and everybody comes to me so much that if I start asking back for help, it would make me feel like that's been tough for me to get over. Is that asking for help, or talking myself up, selling myself or anything. These are the toughest things for me. So getting out here and putting this human factor into things is something that's rather new to me. It's less than 10 years old. And somewhere in there, I think that I learned that it was necessary, and then how difficult it is for me. I can't even, for somebody else to come in and have the conversation is difficult for me. So, and I see some people who are great at it. They just have that people skills where they just naturally, everybody, that they talk to is almost becomes a friend immediately. And I'm not exactly like that.
I find those people to be so fascinating. Someone told me I was one of those people the other day, and I was like, really? I don't know.
Yeah, I think you are one of those people. So
thanks, Bob.
And, which is where we're, why we're doing this, and we need to put ourselves out there. I think that part of the point that I wanted to make was, we get so caught up in our regular things. So for weeks now, I hadn't really taken off. I think I went to Acadia back when to Maine when my son graduated, with his PhD or whatever up there back in, it's 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. And I hadn't taken off a day since then. And then this last Saturday, I decided, when I was invited to this event on Saturday, an all-day event, that even though I was going to, in the end, be up and it's going to be like 100 degrees on Saturday, I'm going to be outside running around, I went ahead and went. And I didn't realize how much I really needed that time away to step away. But part of why I was thinking that I shouldn't is because I have so many things to do, and sometimes my wife will come home and she'll ask me, "Did you get your work done today?" And I'm like, well, my work is never done. So I just have to stop. Yeah. So, maybe my work will be done when I sell the company or when I decide what I'm going to do. I don't know. But it's not really work to me, so I keep doing it. It's some of the things I enjoy doing, but we do have to stop and force ourselves to talk to people. And that's my worst thing, because I'll sit here and write and read and do all these things, whether it's accounting or tech stuff and all that kind of stuff, and then forget that I need to have conversations with people. So I have these little rules of things I'm supposed to do every day now, and that I keep in my OneNote that says, I have to reach out to at least one new potential client or business partner. I have to contact an existing one every day, and just so that I'm continuing, and it then becomes more of a habit that you work into your routine, that you're looking up somebody you're contacting, and then sending emails, but we should all put that into our networking thing, that, it's not like you have to call 10, 15 or spend the whole day on the phone.
Or even 100, right? Because some of these places, some people, when they hear cold calling, they're like, I will not become a call service, or telemarketing service, I should say. But
oh no, and I've left some of them in tears over the years, and nowadays I think about that and I think they were just doing their job, but they interrupted me.
the stress was on.
The stress was on there. But so now, and we think about this, I'm a little more relaxed in today than I was 10 years ago. And I think it's because we have to find that balance in everything we do, from our personal lives, our health. And I know everybody says work-life balance. When you work at home like you and I do, or work from home like you and I do, we get out. Getting out is a great little trip nowadays when we go to talk to somebody. So it's like something we really want to do. If we can make an appointment to go and get out, because it's not just that 15 or 20 minutes you're spending with that person. It's also the drive there, the little things you get to stop along the way. They're like little treats that we get. It's like stopping and smelling the roses.
The podcast I get to listen to on the ride over.
Those things, so as we work so hard and so difficult to find those balances, our human relationships, whether they're related to work or whether they're personal, we need to make certain that we're taking those times to do that. So,
absolutely. I think it's so
which
important.
is collaboration, all of it.
Exactly. I don't think it needs to be like this big scary monster or this responsibility looming over our head. I think like anything else, it could be what we define it to be, or I guess fluid. And as you mentioned, your efforts for collaborating on a weekly basis look different. You make a phone call, you send your emails, you do your social outreach, whatever that may be. And they say success is small habits that compound over time, right? I think that's the quote.
Yes.
And so it just becomes a part of the way that you do business. And then before you know it, your collaborations become a little bit more permanent. Maybe you leave some behind because they're not a good fit. Like that happens too. And through continuing your collaborative efforts, you're able to find, I think ultimately, like, what's a really good fit? What's the gift that keeps on giving? And that's a two-way street, I think.
I think that's how we find our niche. So
absolutely.
Every time I've started over, it's always about building that foundation first, making certain that all the little things are being taken care of, that allows you to be able to go forward and have those collaborations, those explorations, those, how do I find what's going to be there? So next, so having that idea, I do know that this time was more intentional than in the past. Before it was all about trucking, and this time it's not. So, but it is about collaboration. It is about the human things, about finding the balance, and whatnot. So that I'll let the younger guys worry about those assets.
Absolutely.
and be out there.
No, absolutely. No, that makes sense. No, that's awesome. And I think that's a good way to wrap up this segment on collaborative competition and logistics. So I just want to thank you again for your time today, Bob.
You're welcome. So, and I see we went over our little time that we wanted to try to keep it to.
I think it was worth it.
It's been fun.
Absolutely. I'm going to end this one here.